Saul Canelo Alvarez. Terence Bud Crawford.
Make sure y'all stay on point with the Puncher's Point. What is good, y'all? Welcome back to the Puncher's Point. It's around that time. This might be very well the fight of the century. Now, I need to take y'all back. Back in 2015, we had Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao, and it did not live up to the expectations. Now, fast forward a little over 10 years, and we got Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Crawford. Now, here's the thing about Canelo Alvarez and Terence Crawford. At first, when this fight got announced, I wasn't too excited about it. I thought Terence Crawford might have been biting a little bit more than he could chew. However, as I started seeing them do the face-offs and I started seeing them side by side, it looked like Terence Crawford not only was the same size as Canelo, but there were also moments where it looked like Crawford was a little bit bigger than Canelo. And sometimes I forget how much of a freak of nature Terence Crawford is. And I'm not going to lie to you, I'm extremely impressed with him jumping up not one, but two weight classes to go and fight Canelo Alvarez. Now, regardless, these are two of the best fighters in the sport today. By the time it's all said and done, when their careers are all done, they're going to be first ballot Hall of Famers. Their careers are almost equally as great. I mean, we're talking about two guys who are four-time division champions. We're talking about two guys who are two-time undisputed. They fought so many champions throughout the years. I believe Canelo Alvarez is in his 24th title fight, and I believe Terence Crawford is in his 19th title fight. So now, all of a sudden, here we are, Canelo Alvarez, Terence Crawford. Now, before we get into everything, I do want to say that when we break through this fight, this is going to be a very, very tough fight to call. It might be the closest fight to call. And the reason why is because, again, both of these guys are equally as great as one another. However, the reason why this fight is going to be so difficult to call is because we just don't know how this fight is going to turn out. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. And again, there's a lot of questions that are going to have to be answered. So with that being said, let's start off with it. Let's start off with Canelo Alvarez. He's a cash cow of boxing. We got to start treating him that way. Canelo Alvarez, his last fight going up against William Skull, there have been a lot of questions about Canelo Alvarez and where he's at now, and overall, what type of Canelo Alvarez are we going to see? I mean, let's be real. He hasn't knocked out a guy in, I believe it's been 6 fights now. So Canelo Alvarez got a lot. And by a lot, I mean he's got a lot to prove. So with that being said, let's get into the breakdown of Canelo Alvarez. Now, as far as Canelo, we got to talk about his strength. To me, one of the most known strengths about Canelo Alvarez is how he's able to be the aggressor and his pressure. I mean, every single fight, again, I know he hasn't knocked out a guy in over 6 fights. However, every single fight that Canelo Alvarez has been in, he's always been the guy delivering the pressure. He's always been the guy that's been pushing his opponents on the back foot. There's very little times, there's very rare moments where you see Canelo Alvarez on the ropes. There's very rare times where you see Canelo Alvarez being pushed back. I mean, I can only count a few on hand. We talk about Dimitri Bivol. We talk about Triple G. And overall, to me, to be honest with you, that's about as many times as I've seen Canelo Alvarez on the back foot. So with that being said, I will say his pressure is definitely one of his known strengths or most known strengths. I believe that's something that Canelo Alvarez has had a lot of success with. It's been a strength that not many opponents that he's been in the ring with can match. So I'm going to go with that one right there. That's the most known. The other thing I will say, if we're going to point to a certain punch, my favorite punch from Canelo Alvarez is the overhand right or the straight right. And the reason why I love that punch so much is because I feel like that's his bread and butter right there. That's his go-to punch. And he times it so well, too. I mean, he knows when to time it. He knows when to bait his opponents into throwing that punch. And I believe it's something he learned from the Mayweather fight, because Mayweather baited him with that same exact punch. And it seemed like after that Mayweather fight, he was able to use that overhand right. He was able to use that straight right. And not only did he use it, but he also, I believe, he utilized it a lot better than Floyd Mayweather. He utilized it in the Jonathan Kirkland fight, and he utilized it in the Amir Khan fight. And he just knows how to bait opponents into throwing that straight right hand, and he knows how to bait them into basically falling for it. And he basically, when he throws that right hand, there's no stopping him. When he throws that right hand, he's clipping you with it. The other punch I really like from Canelo Alvarez is that left hook. He really finds a way to sneak that left hook in. And even though it's a secondary punch for him, I will say that's another punch of his that always seems to find the money. And on top of that, he also throws that left hook in many different ways. I mean, if we're going and we're looking at Canelo Alvarez, he throws that left hook to the head. He'll throw it to the body, and he's knocked down a lot of guys with that left hook body shot. The other punch that he's very, very good with is, I will say, he is very good with his uppercuts, and he does know how to sneak those in, especially on the inside, especially when he's head-to-head with an opponent, when both of those guys are on the inside and they're trying to exchange. Canelo Alvarez just knows how to land that uppercut. He knows how to land those types of punches, and that's another punch that he seems to clip opponents with, and when he clips them, he rocks their head back. Canelo Alvarez, the thing about him is, which is another strength of his sequences. He knows when to throw certain punches and when to throw them in certain moments, and that's what makes Canelo Alvarez so great, is because there's a lot of guys who stick to one punch. There's a lot of guys who have a punch and they're like, that's their bread and butter. That's the punch to stay away from. But with Canelo Alvarez, it's not like that. He knows how to throw certain punches in certain situations, and he knows his sequences. He knows what type of combos he's going to throw. He knows when to throw them, and he knows how to bait opponents into getting caught with those types of shots. So I will say Canelo Alvarez is very good at that, and that is a very rare skill that not many boxers in today's have, but Canelo Alvarez is one of them. He's very good with slips. Now, here's the thing. Canelo Alvarez, I'm not going to say he's a defensive guru. However, this is what I will say. In the last 6 to 7 fights that he's fought in, it seems like even though he's got the pressure, he's been relying a lot more on that defense. I believe that Floyd Mayweather fight taught him a valuable lesson in defense. And I believe ever since that Floyd Mayweather fight, Canelo Alvarez has been very, very effective when it comes to the defensive side of boxing. And for me, when I look at Canelo Alvarez, he might not have the foot movement. He might not have the footwork, but man, is he good with slips. Canelo Alvarez is incredible when it comes to slipping punches. He's very good at minimalizing the amount of times he gets landed on. Canelo Alvarez is very good at slipping those types of punches, and I will say that that is a skill that veteran Canelo Alvarez has mastered. Maybe young Canelo Alvarez hasn't mastered that. Young Canelo Alvarez was very good at pressuring his opponents. Young Canelo Alvarez was very good at basically landing those power punches, but if we go back and we remember young Canelo Alvarez, he wasn't landing certain punches that this Canelo Alvarez is, and he wasn't slipping punches that this Canelo Alvarez is. So I will say that as he's progressed in the sport of boxing, as a Canelo Alvarez, he's a legend. He's a living legend. He's a veteran of the game. Since he's been in the later years of his career, he's been very good with slipping those types of punches. And last but not least, he's very good at attacking that body. And again, I mentioned the left hook to the body, but he's very good at attacking that body. And again, if you are in that pocket with him and you're trying to go blow for blow, a lot of these guys, they try to take his head off. They try to aim high, but they don't aim low. They don't protect themselves to the body. And whenever they lift those arms, Canelo Alvarez knows exactly when to throw that body punch, and he's right there with it. And he's knocked down a lot of guys. He's knocked out a lot of guys with that body punch, and he's hurt a lot of guys with that body punch. And even in certain exchanges and engages, when a lot of guys are on the inside, those body punches tend to have their back up. So I will say, as far as the strengths, those would be the overall strengths I would have for Canelo Alvarez. Now, if we're talking about the strengths with Canelo Alvarez, there's also the weaknesses with Canelo. And some of these weaknesses have grown as he's gotten older, but some of these weaknesses have been there from the very beginning. So I'm going to go over these weaknesses. First up, he struggles with fighters who have footwork. And that's been the story of his entire career. Guys like Erislandy Lara, that was a very, very competitive fight. And Canelo Alvarez, he just couldn't handle that footwork from Lara. Floyd Mayweather is the obvious given. And then there's guys who have that type of footwork, but they don't use it in the way that an Erislandy Lara or a Floyd Mayweather would. Guys like Dimitri Bivol, where he might take a couple steps back. He's not going to stay in the pocket with Canelo Alvarez. When Bivol fought Canelo Alvarez, what made Bivol so dominant in that fight was A, he was from a bigger weight class, and I believe that had something to do with it. But B, what made Bivol so successful against Canelo Alvarez was he wasn't moving around the ring like Erislandy Lara and Floyd Mayweather, but he would land 2-3 punch combinations and he would back up. He wouldn't give Canelo Alvarez the satisfaction of staying in the pocket with him and going toe-to-toe. He would back up, he would use his footwork, and he would basically just take little steps to back up to get out of range so Canelo Alvarez couldn't land some counter. So Canelo Alvarez couldn't get his lift back. And for me, That was very important. And then you look at Triple G, he did the same exact thing. But the difference between Bivol and Triple G stayed in there longer. And it gave Canelo Alvarez chances to climb back into the round, climb back into the fight. And it gave him chances to land some punches on Triple G. But Triple G, what made him so successful in that fight was he could match the pressure of Canelo Alvarez, like I said earlier in this episode. However, he also had a little bit of footwork to him. And there were times where Canelo Alvarez couldn't get a punch back, or there were times where Canelo Alvarez couldn't land a counter. So I do believe footwork is a very, very, very important aspect and an important weakness of Canelo Alvarez's game. And that's an important weakness that has been there since he's been 24 years old against Floyd Mayweather. The other weakness with Canelo Alvarez is sometimes he runs into power shots, and specifically the backhand. I'll give you a perfect example. That Floyd Mayweather fight is a perfect example of that. And I believe that right there, that weakness is the biggest weakness that Crawford needs to take advantage of when he goes into this fight. Canelo Alvarez, when he was going into that fight with Floyd Mayweather, he wanted to be the bull. He wanted to be the pressure fighter. And when he would come in, Floyd Mayweather already knew what counter to pull, and it was that backhand. Floyd Mayweather had that backhand ready, and whenever Canelo Alvarez would come in, he would clip him with that backhand. Now, Floyd Mayweather, he didn't move around as much as Orlando Lara. However, Floyd Mayweather, he kept everything short and simple. And whenever Canelo Alvarez would come on in, whenever Canelo Alvarez thought he had an open, Floyd would just hit him with that backhand. And to me, that right there is a weakness that I believe Crawford has to use to win this fight. And I'm going to get to the keys to victory, and that's going to be a part of it. But I do believe that might be one of the biggest weaknesses that Crawford's going to have to take advantage of. He struggles with the jab. Perfect example, I mean, Triple G, that fight, he struggled with the jab a lot. And even in the Bivol fight, he struggled with the jab a lot. And I do feel like there hasn't been too many fighters that have utilized that jab successfully against Canelo Alvarez, and it's because they kind of shy away from it. Everybody walks into this fight with Canelo Alvarez thinking they're going to knock his head off. They're going to go in there. They're going to push the pace. They're going to push him around. And you can't do that with Canelo Alvarez. There's only been very few that can. And I'm sorry, but most opponents, 90% of those opponents are not going to be that guy. You have to be a certain fighter to do that. And I believe that when it comes to Canelo Alvarez, I believe that working that jab is crucial. And I believe that's one of the weaknesses that Canelo Alvarez has is keep working that jab. Just keep sticking him with that jab. Force Canelo Alvarez to stay at bay. Force Canelo Alvarez to stay where he is. Keep him out of range. I believe that is a very important key. And it's a very important weakness that you can utilize against Canelo Alvarez. He struggles with fighters who don't stay in the pocket, as I mentioned before, guys like Dimitri Bivol. That was an excellent performance, and I do believe that is the best strategy to defeating Canelo Alvarez. And look, if we're looking at Floyd, Orlando Lara, Triple G in the first fight, and Dimitri Bivol, they do have similarities. Both of those guys are guys who have decent footwork and can move around. Both of those guys are guys who are not going to stay complacent. And both of those guys are guys that are going to catch Canelo Alvarez in counters. However, they all had success with Canelo in many different ways. Even William Skull. I'm not saying William Skull had the perfect game plan because it was a boring fight and he didn't have a lot of offense. But again, you can use the Orlando Lara / William Skull, and yes, I do believe it is the same game plan, which is move around the ring as much as you can, force Canelo Alvarez to make mistakes. You could use the Floyd Mayweather game plan, which is basically lure Canelo in and then clip him with a counter punch or a counter power punch. You can use Bivol's game plan, which is basically stick him with the jab and land 2-3 punch combinations and slip out, which I believe is the best game plan. Or you could use Triple G's game plan, which is if you find the success with it, pressure him and basically don't stay in his space to give him time to react. So I will say, for me, Bivol's game plan is the best, and it is the one that I believe you can use, and it will be easier to have success with than the other three. He's slowing down. We can't ignore the fact that Canelo Alvarez is slowing down. I mean, the guy is 35, 36 years old, and he's not the same guy that he was 4 or 5 years ago when he was chasing undisputed with that super middleweight division. He's not the same guy who was fighting Caleb Plant. He's not the same guy that fought Billy Joe Saunders. He's not the same guy. He's not even the same guy that fought Jermell Charlo. To me, Canelo Alvarez, he's slowing down, but he still is a threat. However, it's not the same guy, and I do believe that is a question. That is one of the questions in my mind about can Canelo Alvarez turn back the hands of time in this performance against Terence Crawford. And last but not least, he's always had a hard time with cutting the ring, especially in that William Skull fight. That showed to me that not only is he slowing down, but he can't cut the ring. and he can't cut the ring against certain opponents that he used to cut the ring against. And I do believe that if Crawford's going to use that type of movement, Canelo Alvarez is going to have a rough night if he can't cut that ring. So for me, that would be the overall strengths and weaknesses for Canelo Alvarez. Now, when we talk about Canelo Alvarez, we got to go to his opposition. And with that being said, we going to switch right to Terence Crawford, man. So with that being said, let's go straight into Terence Crawford's strengths. The first one that comes to mind, and this is a very, very, very rare strength. He's a switch hitter. There are not many guys that can fight orthodox and southpaw in this game, but Terence Crawford is one of them. Terence Crawford has mastered how to fight as a lefty and a righty, and not many people can say that, you know? So that's going to be a strength that is going to be extremely important in this fight, because he's going to have to give Canelo Alvarez different looks. And there's not many guys who can give Canelo Alvarez different looks, but he's one of them. Terence Crawford is one of those guys that can give him different looks. So I will say, to me, that is one of the biggest strengths for Terence Crawford. He loves that straight left. That straight left for Terence Crawford, it's right on the money. And again, that is going to be a punch that he is going to have to land on Canelo Alvarez to have success. So I do believe that's his best punch. If I got to point to a secondary punch, his right uppercut. He loves to throw that right uppercut, and he'll throw it, again, just like Canelo Alvarez, when a guy is going toe-to-toe with him. When they're close together and they're in the middle of an exchange, he loves throwing that right uppercut. And to me, that is the secondary punch that he has to land on Canelo Alvarez if he's going to engage onto the inside, if he chooses that route or if he chooses that game plan. He's very good with foot placement. The thing about Terence Crawford is he's very good at placing his feet a certain way to get his opponents to move where he wants to move them. He's very good at putting his foot onto the outside of opponents so they can't go into the outside of him. He's very good at that type of foot placement. He's very good at getting his opponents up against the ropes and basically confining them there. So I will say his foot placement is very, very elite. And I believe it's definitely a tool that Terence Crawford has used throughout his career to kind of shrink the space on his opponents. And who knows, he might do it against Canelo Alvarez. I wouldn't recommend it. And I'll get to that in the keys to victory. I wouldn't recommend it, but I do believe that that is a very big strength for Terence Crawford. He's very patient. Just like Canelo Alvarez, he is very, very patient. Again, he's not that type of guy that's going to charge like a bull like Canelo Alvarez. I believe Crawford is more of a reactive fighter than a pressure fighter. He waits for you to make the mistakes, and when you make the mistakes, he clicks right on it. So for me, he's a reactive fighter. And when he starts landing his counters, when he starts clicking, when he starts basically figuring you out, once he gets that puzzle figured out, then he becomes the aggressor. And to me, that's going to be very important in this fight, because we're talking about a guy who's an aggressor versus a guy who reacts to what you're giving him. And to me, from all the guys that Canelo Alvarez has fought, besides Triple G that he's had problems with, they've all been reactive fighters. So again, that could be a tool right there. And last but not least, great footwork. He's got great footwork. Again, Terence Crawford, he's not going to be that guy that runs around the ring and everything like that. No, he wants to give you a fight. But he also has very good footwork. He also doesn't stay in the same place. He doesn't stay complacent. He doesn't stay in the same spot. I'm not going to lie to you. Recently, it looked like he kind of slowed down with that a little bit. Not too much, but a little bit. But again, I still count it as a strength for Terence Crawford. Now, let's get to the weaknesses of Terence Crawford. So as far as the weaknesses, the first one that comes to mind is he struggles with hyper movement. Now, in order for y'all to understand that, go look at the Sean Porter fight. Go look at the Israel Madrimov fight. If you go look at those fights, those are guys who had hyper movement. Those are guys who were going to land one punch and they were going to move. And they did it in different ways. See, if you go and you look at the Madrimov fight, the way Madrimov did it was he threw one punch and he would slide around. He threw one punch and he would move to the left. He threw one punch and would move to the right. He didn't stay in the same place, and he knows that Terence Crawford is a reactive fighter. If you land a shot at him, he wants to get that shot back. So Madrimov knew that he couldn't stay in the same place. Madrimov's footwork was elite in that fight, and I believe that's the reason why that fight was so close. Now you go to the Sean Porter aspect of it. Sean Porter, he wasn't moving around in that way. However, the way Sean Porter was doing it, because if y'all forgot, I know he knocked out Sean Porter, but before that knockout happened, Sean Porter was winning the fight on the judges' scorecards. So how was he doing it? Well, when I go back and I look at that fight, Sean Porter, basically, he would kind of stay low, lay low, And when he would throw punches, he would basically throw a punch and he would kind of duck, slip, keep low, and he would basically use that punch to kind of get into the inside. He didn't stay in the same place. There were also times where he would cut angles on Terence Crawford as well. And I believe that gave Terence Crawford a lot of trouble in those fights. Guys with hyper movement, he tends to struggle with. He gets clipped by right hands a lot. That would be a weakness. And again, you can go to the Majimov fight. You can go to the Sean Porter fight. He gets clipped with right hands a lot. And I do believe that that right hand is going to be a tool that Canelo Alvarez is going to have to use against Terence Crawford. So for me, that would be the punch that I believe Crawford is, I don't want to say weak, but it's a punch that Crawford gets clipped with a decent amount. I would say if you're going to pick a punch, that would be the one. He can be pushed back. And again, that's the question that we have. Again, when we're talking about an aggressor versus a guy who's reactive, can the aggressor push Terence Crawford back? Well, again, you go back to the Sean Porter fight. There have been times where he got pushed back. The Majimov fight, there were a few times where he got pushed back. And I believe the reason why he got pushed back is because when you can find that space on Terence Crawford and you protect yourself, that's when Terence Crawford starts getting pushed back. He starts fighting on the back foot a little bit. You could take advantage of him in the orthodox stance. And again, you can also stick him with that jab from that stance. So again, I said it, he mastered the orthodox and the southpaw stance, but I like him better in the southpaw stance. In the orthodox stance, he's very good. And he's very good when it comes to throwing counters. But if you go look at him as a right-handed fighter and go look at him as a left-handed fighter. Perfect example of it. He was a right-handed fighter in the Kell Brook fight for most of that fight. When he was sticking that jab, Terence Crawford's counter punch was his jab to kind of counter back. And to me, you're throwing a left jab to counter. And then when you're in the southpaw stance, you're trying to throw that straight left. So either way, his best counter was a left hand. So for me, I like him better in the southpaw stance. Even though he's good in the orthodox stance, I like him better in the southpaw stance. But when he was in the orthodox stance, he was going to stick with jabs. And on top of that, he just didn't look as comfortable as he was in the southpaw stance. So you can take advantage of him in that orthodox stance. I will say that right now. And last but not least, the inactivity. Every single time Terence Crawford fights, it seems like it's been a year. It seems like it's been a decent amount of time. There's a big gap for when he comes back into fights. And it's almost like he's like the Kendrick Lamar of boxing. And I'm not saying that because, again, they get mixed up. The reason why I'm saying that is because with Terence Crawford, the reason why I call him the Kendrick Lamar of boxing is because he'll have a great fight, he'll make history, and then he'll leave. And then you give it a year and he'll come back and he'll make history again and he'll leave. He's not an active fighter. Again, he's not as active as Canelo Alvarez. I can look at all the strengths and weaknesses I want for Canelo Alvarez, but Canelo Alvarez is fighting 2-3 times. Crawford's not doing that. So for me, inactivity might be an important question in this fight. And so with that being said, we got to go to the keys to victory. So we're going to start off with Canelo Alvarez. Well, what would be Canelo Alvarez's keys to victory? And when I go and I look at the keys to victory for Canelo Alvarez, the first thing I point to would be basically load up that right hand and that right straight counter. So for me, that would be the first key. Again, load it up. Like I said, Terence Crawford, if there's one punch that he gets clipped with, it's that right hand. And if you go and you look back at the Majimov fight, you go and you look back at the Porter fight, I noticed that Terence Crawford, especially in the Majimov fight, he would get clipped with just one punch power punches. It wouldn't be a jab. It'd just be a one punch power punch. And a lot of the times, it was the right hand. So for me, that would be the first key to victory for Canelo Alvarez. The second key to victory would basically be stick to 1 to 2 punch combinations and push Crawford back. That's how not only Majimov did it, but Sean Porter did it as well. Stick to that 1-2 punch combination and push him back. And then when you push him back, you can start loading up punches. You still got to be careful because I know Terence Crawford is coming from 2 weight classes lower, but Terence Crawford is still Terence Crawford. He still pops a punch. He's still got power. He's still a dangerous threat. But again, once you start laying those 1-2 punch combinations and you can push Terence Crawford back, then you can have a lot more success with landing some more punches, getting him on those ropes, forcing Terence Crawford to be put in certain situations where he's got to defend himself. And then last but not least, target the body when he moves lateral. If you go and you watch the fight with Erzlandi Lara, and you go and you watch the fight with William Skull, if Terence Crawford wants to take that approach, that's perfectly fine. I don't think he's going to take that approach. I'll let you know what approach he takes when I get to the prediction part. But what I will say is target the body when he moves lateral. If you go and you look at the William Skull fight and you go and you look at the Erzlandi Lara fight, for me, when those guys were moving lateral near the ropes, Canelo Alvarez had a lot of success with throwing that body punch. And again, I do believe the body punch is going to be very important, not just for Canelo, but for Crawford as well. I believe those are going to be some punches that both of them are going to have to utilize. But for Canelo, I believe it's more important because if they're moving around laterally, again, Canelo Alvarez, he's not the most gracious when it comes to his footwork. So I do believe that he's going to have to land those body shots when he has that chance. When they're moving lateral, he's going to have to land those body shots. Because we seen what happened when it was Errol Spence and Terence Crawford. Errol Spence, he would duck his head low to land a body punch, and Terence Crawford would basically start landing that right hand on him. So for me, I do believe that when we're looking at this fight, the best time for Canelo Alvarez to throw body punches is going to be when Crawford moves lateral. Now, the keys to victory for Terence Crawford. When we're looking at Terence Crawford and the keys to victory for Terence Crawford, the first key to victory is don't stay in the pocket. Do not stay in the pocket with Canelo Alvarez, because when you do that, Canelo Alvarez will take advantage. I know Terence Crawford's a freak, but again, the last place you want to be is in the pocket with Canelo Alvarez, because that's when he starts really targeting your body. That's when he starts throwing those uppercuts, and that is when you're going to have to be tested in a way of, can you handle the size? Can you handle the power? Can you handle the pressure of Canelo Alvarez? That's when those questions are going to be answered. So I will say, do not stay in the pocket with him. The second key to victory is let him run into your power punches. That is what I will say. And again, do it how Floyd Mayweather did it. And that's a big thing because Floyd Mayweather was in Terence Crawford's camp, basically giving him advice and basically getting him ready for Canelo Alvarez. If there's one guy that you could listen to, it's Floyd Mayweather. So when you go and you look at that fight, you got to understand the way Floyd Mayweather beat him. The way Floyd Mayweather beat him was using those power punches. Letting Canelo Alvarez fall into the traps, letting Canelo Alvarez get clipped with those punches. He's going to fall into them. He is going to get hit with those power punches, but you are going to have to lure him in, and you are going to have to stay patient. So for me, that would be the second key. And last but not least, the third key I would have for Terence Crawford is stick the jab and stay off the ropes. Again, just keep on sticking that jab. Put the Bivol approach on him. Keep sticking that jab. If you want to go in and land a 1-2 punch combination, feel free, but you got to keep sticking that jab on Canelo Alvarez. And I do believe if you stick that jab on him, that gives you a lot more opportunity to move around. It gives you a lot more opportunity to cut the angles on Canelo Alvarez and force him to make a mistake. So I will say those are the keys to victory for Terence Crawford. Let's get to the betting odds. The favorite in this fight is going to be Canelo Alvarez by minus 180, while the underdog is going to be Terence Crawford by plus 145, according to DraftKings. Now, the most likely outcome is going to be Canelo Alvarez by decision, while the least likely outcome is going to be a draw. But besides that draw, the least likely outcome will be Terence Crawford by knockout. So with that being said, who does Mario have win this fight? Like I said, it's going to be really close. Here's what I will say. I could see a draw. If there's one draw that we are going to have, I said it was going to be Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Crawford. However, we had our draw with Manny Pacquiao and Mario Barrios. So I'm taking the draw out of the equation. Here is where it gets very, very difficult for me to make a prediction. There's a lot of questions. Can Terence Crawford handle the power of Canelo Alvarez? Can Canelo Alvarez handle the footwork of Terence Crawford? Is Terence Crawford going to be in fight shape at 2 weight classes higher than what he usually fights in? Is Canelo Alvarez going to turn back the hands of time against Terence Crawford? There's a lot of questions at hand. Will the inactivity of Terence Crawford be a factor? There's a lot of questions. With that being said, when I looked at the keys to victory, and I looked at the strengths, and I looked at the weaknesses, I believe there's a better case for Terence Crawford winning this fight than Canelo Alvarez. So when you ask me what my prediction is, I'm going to go with Terence Crawford by split decision. The way I see this fight happening is I do believe Terence Crawford is going to use a mix of what Floyd Mayweather and Dimitri Bivol did. I believe that when we see Terence Crawford in this ring, he's going to look like the bigger opponent against Canelo Alvarez. I do believe he is a bigger guy than what he's fighting at. I do believe that Canelo Alvarez is going to have his moments, and I believe that Terence Crawford is going to stick in that fight, and he is going to bring a fight to Canelo Alvarez, and I believe Canelo Alvarez is going to test Terence Crawford. But the way I look at it is this. I've seen Canelo Alvarez in big fights against Floyd Mayweather and Dimitri Bivol, and he did not show up. The first Triple G fight, it wasn't his best. I've seen him in big fights. Terence Crawford, I've seen him in one big fight, and he dominated. Now, again, Errol Spence is not Canelo Alvarez. So, again, that question of can he handle the power of Canelo is going to come into play. However, I believe he will because he's been in that big-time moment before, just like Canelo Alvarez has, except the only difference is he has the skills of a Dimitri Bivol. He has the skills of a Floyd Mayweather to pull it off. And that is my prediction right there. I think it's going to be a very competitive fight. I think it's going to be a majority decision or a split decision. I'm leaning more on a split decision, but I got Terence Crawford by split decision. He is going to become a 3-time undisputed champion, a 5-division weight champion. He is going to be the #1 pound-for-pound fighter, and I do believe that this is going to put Terence Crawford on a whole nother stratosphere. I thought the Errol Spence fight was going to be as good as he gets for Terence Crawford. This is going to put him on a whole different level. And it's crazy because Terence Crawford, he's older than Canelo Alvarez, but it doesn't look like he's declining at the same rate that Canelo Alvarez is. And to me, I do believe that Terence Crawford don't have a lot of fights left. I do believe that this might be his last fight, or unless they do a rematch. Again, I assume that there's going to be a rematch clause in this fight. But overall, when it comes to this fight, I'm just leaning a little bit more on Terence Crawford and Canelo Alvarez. Now, as far as everybody who's watching for the betting aspect of it, would I put a bet on Canelo Alvarez? Yes, absolutely. I do believe that there is a good possibility that Canelo Alvarez's strength and power and pressure might be too much for Terence Crawford to handle. And I do believe that he could go into that fight and he could basically dog walk Crawford around. Now, everybody's saying there's going to be a knockdown in this fight. I don't think there's going to be a knockdown. I don't think there's going to be a knockdown. I don't think there's going to be a knockout. I think both of these guys are going to go into this ring. Both of these guys are going to give a great fight, but nobody's going to be knocked down. I don't believe there's going to be a knockdown. Do I see a draw happening? Absolutely. I can see it happening from a mile away. We seen what happened with the Triple G Canelo fight when the first time happened. Even though Triple G clearly won that fight, they ruled it a draw to get a second fight out of it. Do I think a draw is going to happen? No. I don't think you can use boxing politics into this one. If you want to place a bet on it, feel free. But again, for me, if you want a real bet, I think you need to place it on Crawford by decision. So for me, I got Terence Crawford winning this fight by split decision. He's going to barely squeak out of there with the win, but regardless, Canelo Alvarez is going to get out of there with the win. And so with that being said, we're going to have to see what happens. Again, we got Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Crawford September 13th in Vegas. Again, this might be one of the biggest fights in boxing history. Both of these guys, I expect them to bring on a show. I expect these guys to put on a show. We got 2 different legacies here. Again, both of these guys are killing it. Both of these guys are pound-for-pound fighters, 4-division weight champions, 2-time undisputed champions. And again, Crawford is stepping up 2 weight classes to fight Canelo Alvarez. And who knows what we're going to see. It's going to be on Netflix, so make sure y'all definitely go check that out. But this is going to be a great fight. It's going to be a huge fight, and I can't wait to see it happen. And so with that being said, it's time for us to log out. Make sure y'all continue to tune into the Puncher's Point. Again, I got something very special coming on Discord. And with that being said, this is the Puncher's Point. Make sure y'all continue to tune into the social medias. Again, we got Instagram, X, Facebook, Threads, Reddit, Discord, all those types of things. So make sure y'all continue to tune into the Puncher's Point. And last but not least, make sure y'all stay on point with the Puncher's Point.